Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dan Helms. I'm from New Readers Press, and I have the pleasure today to introduce our presenter, Lynne Weintraub. Lynne is the ESL Citizenship Coordinator for the Jones Library ESL Center in Amherst, Massachusetts. She's also the author of the textbook series Citizenship, Passing the Test. That series is published by Pro Literacy New Readers Press. Lynne also consults on curriculum and professional development and provides technical assistance to English, literacy, civics, and citizenship programs throughout the country. And now it's time to hear from our presenter. Lynne?
Thank you, Dan. Good afternoon, everybody. As Stan mentioned, I am the author of the Citizenship Passing the Test series, which includes the white book you see in the front, the Civics and Literacy book, the blue Literacy Skills Workbook, the red Ready for the Interview book, which has just come out in a new edition, and the Teacher's Guide for all three books. I run a library literacy program in Western Massachusetts, and I've been doing that for about 40 years. Some of the students here work on citizenship, and I have maintained a 100% pass rate. And that is because I keep a very close eye on what they're doing with their tutors, and I make sure that students don't send in their applications until they really are ready for their interviews. So today I'm going to talk about the English speaking test, and I want to begin by giving you a quick overview of the citizenship interview in general and how that speaking subtest fits into it. At the citizenship interview, the examiner makes sure that the applicant meets all of the qualifications for citizenship. So these include continuous presence in the US, which means they've mostly lived in the US for the last few years and they haven't stayed outside of the US for more than 6 months. Good moral character, which means that they've obeyed the laws and been a responsible person. And we'll get into the specifics of that in a minute. And also attachment to the Constitution. And what they mean by that is that the applicant is willing to swear allegiance to the United States and understands what they're promising. So by the time they get to the interview, applicants have already sent in their N400 application. And this is a complex 14-page document that asks about every imaginable detail of these qualifications for citizenship. So the examiners have a completed application right in front of them at the time of the interview. If they already know the answers to all these questions, why ask them at the interview? Well, the answer to this is one, to update the information because it may have been 6 months or so between the time that they sent the application and the time of their interview. It's also to follow up on and clarify anything that might be a red flag for the examiner. And I think also to see if the responses that the applicant gives are consistent and seem credible. In addition to the 3 qualifications for citizenship that I've already mentioned, there are 2 more. Applicants must show knowledge of basic U.S. history and government, and this is tested by the applicant answering 10 oral questions. Also, they must demonstrate English literacy, reading and writing, and they must demonstrate the ability to speak simple English. How do they do this? By answering questions about their application for citizenship as documented in the application that they have submitted. So there are 3 parts to the citizenship test: literacy, speaking, and civics. I think this is a good time to stress that nearly all of the test is an oral encounter. The applicant is asked to read 1 sentence aloud and write 1 dictated sentence. That's the literacy test. But no other part of the interview requires print literacy. Students who don't read well, they can still succeed at this test if they have access to oral instruction. So as I get into the details of interview preparation, keep in mind that students should be listening and practicing their oral responses and not just reading them. How do applicants prepare for these tests? They can practice the 100 civics questions by using a list that's provided by USCIS. They can practice reading sight words and spelling them using the list provided by USCIS, and that's 2 out of 3 of the subtests. But how do students practice for the speaking test? Does USCIS give them questions to practice or guidelines on what particular oral competencies they need to demonstrate? That would certainly make the test fair and reasonable. And by the way, the USCIS Ombudsman's Office has already pointed this out. But unfortunately, for the time being, the answer is no. USCIS provides almost no guidance at all. Here are the official guidelines for the speaking test. Ability to speak English is determined by the applicant's answers to questions normally asked by an officer during the interview. So in other words, questions about the applicant's qualifications for citizenship. Officers are required to repeat and rephrase questions until they're satisfied that the applicant either fully understands the questions or does not understand English. So it's critical that students know that they can ask examiners to repeat and explain questions they don't understand. And finally, if the applicant generally understands and responds to questions about eligibility, then the applicant demonstrates the ability to speak English. The applicant may respond with simple words or phrases. So theoretically, applicants do not have to demonstrate perfect pronunciation or grammar, or even speak in full sentences, just simple words or phrases. There is a little more. If the applicant is responsive to questions, directions, or prompts during the interview, then the applicant demonstrates the ability to understand English. And second, the ability to understand English will not be based on being asked to provide a definition of a word or phrase found in the N400. The second bullet here was recently added to the scoring guidelines at the request of advocates who were seeing students fail because they were asked to define a word in the N400 application. So now we have it in writing that the examiners are not supposed to do this, but they still do. I'm still hearing reports about this from around the country. So if USCIS provides no specific practice questions or skills competencies to help applicants prepare for the speaking test, how can students study? How can teachers get them ready? The only thing we have to go on is the N400 itself. If you look through the application, you'll see questions about basic personal information like name, date of birth, country of birth, the date they became permanent residents, gender, and also whether they want to change their name. It asks about where they've lived and traveled, generally for the last 5 years. And the reason for this is, remember that one of the qualifications for citizenship is continued residence in the US. It asks where they've worked, if they're working, and this is to ensure that they've paid taxes on their income and that they've supported themselves through legal means. And this, by the way, can include welfare or being a homemaker, collecting a pension, etc. You don't have to be working to be a citizen. It includes the names and ages of children under 18, and this is to see whether the applicant is providing support to those children. Now, these are fairly normal topics that we might teach in an intermediate level ESL class. But wait, there's more. The infamous Part 9 of the citizenship application consists of a long, complex list of questions related to moral character. That's a catch-all term for some unpleasant topics like fraud. So things like getting immigration benefits or public benefits they're not entitled to, or voting as a non-citizen, or cheating on their taxes. And there are also questions on involvement in the criminal justice system and activities that are thought to indicate bad character, like involvement with illegal drugs, or gambling, or prostitution, or bigamy. They also ask about involvement in terrorist, communist, or totalitarian groups. and a whole range of human rights abuses that maybe immigrants were involved in, for example, before they came to the US. So if you want to know what topics your students are going to be asked about, you can look at the application itself and see what information they're looking for. But filling out a form and answering oral questions about it are different language tasks. For example, in the part of the form you see here, applicants fill in their address and tell how long they've lived there. The examiner is going to ask about this, but how exactly will the questions be phrased? The paper application on the left has fields to fill in, but there's no actual questions asked, at least in verbal form. If the applicant applies online, the interface on the right offers the actual question at the top, but you can't access this interface unless you go online, create an account, and start working your way through the various application screens. Examiners can phrase the question all sorts of ways. They might ask open-ended questions like, what's your address? Where do you live? What's your current physical address? Or it could take the form of a command, tell me where you live right now. Or it might be a request, could you state your address, please? But remember, they have the completed form on the computer screen in front of them. So they're more likely to ask, do you still live at 23 Main Street in Springfield, for example? Or are you still at 23 Main Street? Or they might say, on your application, you wrote that your current address is 23 Main Street. Is that correct? We can't teach one precise list of questions because it's going to be different for each applicant. So what's the teacher to do? Here is how Ready for the Interview approaches this problem. At the top of each page I'm showing here, students listen to and read a story told by a particular character. First, the students hear and see the key vocabulary that will appear in any question, no matter how it's worded. Then students see how that character put this information into her N400 form. And below that is a short quiz where students guess how she will answer a verbal question about her interview, about this in her interview. And then the students listen and read a segment of her actual interview and confirm their answers to the quiz. In the new edition, they can also see what it looks like if a character enters the information on the online application. And finally, students hear and read various ways that an examiner might phrase a question. They practice filling in the information on a facsimile of the form that appears right in the book. And teachers can use this page to stage short practice interviews with students who are brave enough to volunteer, using the open-ended questions at the top, like, what is your current address? Or the teacher can refer to the information students have written into their application forms and ask, for example, do you still live at 23 Main Street in Springfield? The teacher's guide tells more about how to stage practice interviews this way. Now, basic personal information like name and address is something we would normally teach in an ESL class, but some of the questions on the form are about topics and vocabulary that we would not normally teach. Topics like torture, genocide, prostitution, and controlled substances. This is difficult vocabulary to explain and discuss in class, and frankly, can be triggering, especially for refugees, because some of them have actually been victims of the human rights abuses and crimes described in these questions. So Ready for the Interview gives little vignettes about fictional characters who have committed these crimes and therefore cannot become citizens. So the focus is on the fictional people rather than your students. The interview is an intimidating event for students. It's a high-stakes encounter, and you can help students by familiarizing them with the process so they know what to expect and they will be a little less nervous. These 2 pages in Ready for the Interview walk the students through a typical interview sequence. Earlier in the presentation, I said that examiners are checking to see whether applicants respond appropriately to questions, directions, or prompts. So it's not just questions the students need to be familiar with. These pages introduce directions or prompts. Students must know things like follow me or remain standing or raise your right hand.
Lynn,
Yes.
you said I could interject if there was a question.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a question from Faye. It says, I thought the knowledge section of the test was being changed to 10 multiple choice questions and the speaking changed to talking about what they see in pictures.
Yeah. Uh, about a year and a half ago, they announced that they were doing a trial test of a new version of the citizenship test, and then they didn't trial it. And so we have, the immigration advocates around the country have been working really hard to get them to make up their minds and announce whether or not they were going to implement this new version of the test. And finally, last week, they put officially in the Federal Register that they have abandoned that new test and they are not going to be going forward with it. So right now, we're still getting the same citizenship test that we have since 2008. It's a really good question, and thanks for reminding me to tell you about that. Should I go on, Dan?
Yes,
All
please
right.
do.
So another thing students may have to deal with is small talk at the beginning of the interview. The examiner might ask about the weather or traffic or who accompanied them here today. And this gives the examiner a quick take on the applicant's level of English proficiency. So if that applicant clearly speaks English well and the examiner can run through the questions really quickly without paraphrasing them, that's what the examiner will do. But if the applicant has limited English, the examiner is supposed to adjust the pace and use simpler phrasing as they conduct the interview. So the book flags this and describes some of the topics that examiners might bring up before they actually begin the interview. I
Another
mentioned
question.
earlier, yeah,
Yeah, just so we've got a question here that just says, and I can't see who it's from. Oh, it's from Linda. Um, no, that's somebody else. Someone said, will students be asked to read aloud some sentences during the interview?
they will be asked to read aloud one sentence. It's actually a question like, when is Memorial Day? Or who was the first president? And you can find a list of these questions in the white book, the civics and literacy book. They can't just ask anything. It has to be one of the sentences that that's listed in the book. Then they're also asked to write the answer to that question as a dictation. So that's the literacy test. But now we're talking about the interview. So as I mentioned earlier, the applicants are asked whether they understand the oath of allegiance and are willing to take that oath. The oath is written in archaic language that even native English speakers have trouble understanding. So Ready for the Interview puts that oath into plain English that teachers can go over with students so the students can honestly say that they do understand what it is that they're promising. Here are some interview segments that students listen to and read in Ready for the Interview. In one, Maria asks the examiner to repeat a question. In the second, she signals that she needs more time and then indicates that she's not sure what a word means. Maria is demonstrating how to repair a gap in the conversation. She's demonstrating several different communication strategies. Almost every interview segment in Ready for the Interview demonstrates a communication strategy like this. And the teacher's guide tells you how to practice them explicitly in the classroom. A little while ago, I told you that examiners are not supposed to ask for definitions of the words on the N400, but some rogue examiners actually do continue to do that. And this is how it might play out. The examiner asks, have you ever been involved with a group that advocated world communism? And the student says no. Then the examiner follows up with, what is communism? And the student doesn't know how to explain it. She may actually know what that word means, but she can't define it in English. So the examiner fails her. Let me show you a different way this can play out. The examiner asks, have you ever been involved with a group that advocated world communism? And the student asks, can you explain communism? Remember, examiners are required to repeat and rephrase as many times as requested. So I urge students to ask for clarification if they don't understand a word. And I also suggest that students arm themselves with ways to explain these tricky vocabulary words, just in case.
Lynn,
Yes.
another question. It says, Lynn, please repeat your answer to the pilot program asked in the previous question.
All right, let me go through this again. Immigration announced that they were going to do a trial of a new version of the test. This was some time ago. They never actually did that trial. And then we didn't hear anything about it for a long time. And finally, last week, they announced in the Federal Register that they were not going to go forward with that new version of the test. So there's not going to be a multiple choice test. It will not be computer-based. There will not be a picture-based speaking test. That has all been taken off the table. If the new administration wants to impose a different test, it will take some time for them to develop it, and they presumably would give us a period of 6 months or a year to retool before any new test is implemented. But for right now, all you need to know is that the current test is going to stay the current test. There is not going to be a computer-based written multiple choice test. They have completely wiped it off the table.
Here's a related question. Are the interviews always in a one-to-one private setting?
They are.
Okay.
Should I go ahead?
Yes, we're good.
All right. So the Ready for the Interview book explains the meaning of vocabulary and questions throughout the book, but it also has a glossary at the end. And there's also a free 3-page download available on the Ready for the Interview webpage at New Readers Press. And Dan is going to put a link to that page in the chat. If you scroll to the bottom of the page, you will see free resources. And one of them is this 3-page download. It offers students a simple way of explaining words like this. And you can find free audio files for the whole book here too. By the way, the audio files are in a zip file, and they're all of the audio for every page of the book.
And
I
there's
strong.
another question. So let's see if I got this right. How and by whom is it determined that a citizen to be is sufficiently literate in English to take the test? How and by whom is it determined that a citizen to be is sufficiently literate in English to take the test?
Okay, so that is a different part of the test. And as I said before, they're asked to write one sentence and read one sentence. And it's based on a vocabulary list that they give out. And if you want to see what those reading and writing sentences are, you can look in the white book, Ready for the Interview Civics and Literacy book, and you will see a list of those sentences. They are asked to read one of them aloud. And if they can't do that, they're given a second and a third sentence to read aloud. And then for the writing test, they're given a dictation, and they have 3 shots at that as well.
And related question, is the reading and writing test done on a screen or on paper?
Most of the field offices are using iPads. So they'll be given an iPad that has a sentence, it's actually a question written on it, and they're just supposed to read that one sentence out loud. Then they're given a blank screen on the iPad and they're given a stylus and they're supposed to write the one sentence dictation.
Next question. And if you need me to put these at the end, let me know. But this question is there a required time limit between when an application is submitted and when the interview must take place?
Nope. It takes as long as it takes. The different field offices have different amounts of time. In our area, about 4 months is what we're looking at right now, but in other parts of the country, it might be 9 months or 10 months. It really depends on your particular field office. It takes as long as it takes, but there is a way of checking to see whether it's taking the normal amount of time. And you can find out more about that on the USCIS website.
All right,
Shall
the
I go ahead?
questions are pouring in now. Do you want me to continue or do
Well,
you?
you know what? I am almost at the end of the
Okay,
presentation, so why don't we
okay,
hold those for a few minutes?
gotcha.
I strongly recommend that students get translations of the questions on the N400 just to make sure that they understand clearly what the examiner will be asking. On the left here, you see a collection of written translations that is put together by the Immigrant Legal Resource Center. It's on their website, and Dan is going to put that address in the chat. But you can easily find it by Googling ILRC translations. Unfortunately, most of the translations that they have so far are based on the prior version of the form, and they'll be updating them as different community groups produce newer translations. But in the meantime, they're still useful for study purposes. Students are finding some really useful YouTubes these days too. If they search on YouTube under citizenship interview, hundreds of videos pop up. And if you type in a language, you can see versions of these interviews with interpretation or captions to explain what the examiner is asking. My students are finding these interviews really helpful because they can hear what the question sounds like in English and then find out what it means in their language, and they can listen to it as many times as they need to. So I hope this information has been helpful to you as you prepare your students for their interviews. And I hope that all of your students meet with success. So we have some time left for questions, and if you want to type them into the chat, Dan will tell me what
Okay,
you
here we
are
go.
asking.
Here we go. Let's see. I've scrolled back too far. Hold on. You know how chat is. How strict every time someone else puts a chat in, it bumps up what I'm reading. How strict is the grading on the writing of the dictation? Does it have to be 100% correct or is a minor spelling error accepted?
It sounds like maybe I need to do a webinar just on the literacy test. Um, for the dictation, there are certain guidelines that the examiners have to follow. And one is that as long as the sentence makes sense to a typical reader, it is acceptable and it passes. So it doesn't have to have perfect spelling. It can even skip a little word like or the. Um, it you don't have to have perfect punctuation. You don't have to have any punctuation. You can write the numbers as digits rather than as words in script. So it's pretty forgiving. And if the student's not able to write the sentence in a way that the examiner thinks is something an ordinary person could read, they have to give a second sentence for the students to try to write. And if that doesn't work, a third sentence. So this is a pretty easy test.
Okay. Can you address the two questions of ethnicity and race?
Can I address them?
That's what it says.
Hmm.
That's from uh,
The N400 form includes a section that is part of the FBI fingerprint check. And the FBI fingerprint check asks for the race and ethnicity of the person being fingerprinted. And I don't know what to say. It's students self-report about their race.
I'm going to unmute Dinah or try to, and if she wants to follow up more on that, she can. I'll do that in a minute, Dinah. Um, is the passport travel history search only tied to each passport number? If an applicant has had two passports, do they search both numbers?
I would say they should search the both numbers, but generally speaking, it's only over a 5-year period. And there's actually a way to look up your own travel history online. I don't have that link readily available, but you can find it on the Jones Library's website under Citizenship.
Okay. Let's see here. Hang on one second. Um, my question is on the N400. It is in the Q&A. Oh, Roberta's telling me to check the Q&A. Okay. Here's another question. For my Hispanic students, what do they check off on? Both? And Dinah, I have unmuted you if you'd like to talk. You have your microphone turned off right now, but I do see you.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
All right. So, and I don't have the N400 in front of me, but could you just read the one on ethnicity and read it to me? I just don't have it in front of me.
So on part 3 of the N400, under ethnicity, they have to check a box that is either Hispanic or Latino or not Hispanic or Latino.
All right. So then the question is on race. What if you're Hispanic? What do you check?
I think that they're supposed to decide whether they are Black or African American or white.
It's odd because for them they don't consider themselves white.
You know what the FBI considers normal and what we consider normal
Yeah.
are probably different things.
So they should put down obviously white, I guess.
If they are. Yeah.
Well, they're not. They're Hispanic.
Yeah. Well, I do not have the answer to that question.
Okay. Okay. I mean, it is, I think I talked to an immigration lawyer and he said that it's interpretive or it's subjective. So, I mean, there's not a correct answer, but it's just tricky for my students. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I can't help with that.
Okay. Thanks.
I have a question from Jafar. I went ahead and unmuted you as well. If you'd like to turn your microphone on, you can ask your question. Go ahead, Jafar. It looks like he turned his microphone on, but I still can't hear him. So I'll do my best here. He says, regarding name changes, if someone chooses to change their name, it's hard because it keeps jumping up and down on me, Lynn. So let me try again. Regarding name changes, if someone chooses to change their name, how late does the ceremony typically run, and how long does the process take?
What's their name?
Okay, so on the N400 form, it asks you if you want to change your name, and if you do, what name do you want to change it to? You can actually decide at the last minute at the interview that you do want to change your name, and you can arrange it at that point too. If you choose to change your name, it's part of the citizenship process. It's kind of customary for people to do that. And it doesn't take any additional paperwork or, court dates or anything like that. It's pretty easy to do. But if you change your name as part of becoming a citizen, that means that your oath ceremony is going to be at a courthouse at a later date. They can't do an administrative ceremony right there after your interview, as sometimes they do. And it also means that the applicant is going to have to go around and change the names on a lot of their other documents, like, bank accounts and, I don't know, all kinds of personal records. So they will need to show that citizenship certificate with the new name just to make sure that it's consistent everywhere.
Okay. If the applicant does not pass, do they have to reapply and pay the fee again, or can they just reschedule another test?
So if the applicant does not pass, they're going to get a checklist that tells what part of the test they passed and what part they didn't pass. And the applicant gets a second interview for free. It's part of the process that they've already paid for. And at the second interview, they will only be tested on the part of the test that they failed before. If they fail a second time, then they can start the process all over again, pay the fee, submit a new application, and they can do that as many times as they like.
Okay. Hey, the next question is for me. It says, if the webinar is being recorded, is it going to be available on the YouTube channel so they can share with others? What we do is it usually takes about a week, but everyone who registers receives a follow-up message. That message contains links to the recording, a certificate of participation, a reminder of any resources that were shared during the webinar. So just watch for that in about a week. It will be on the YouTube channel as well. I'm not exactly sure when it'll be put there. I give it a few days. I check about the middle of next week. If you know where our YouTube channel is, you'll find it there. Then let's see. Jacqueline says, I'm sorry, which library website can the link be found to track international travel? I'm a border market in Southern California, and many of my learners, I wish this wouldn't keep jumping up and down. Many of my learners have traveled across the border nearly every weekend within the last 5 years.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think probably that student can still find the information on the travel website. Maybe I can give that link to you, Dan, and later on you can add it to the email that you sent out to everybody about the webinar.
Okay, that'd be perfect. I'd be happy to do that. Someone just said some Latinos are black, some are white, some are Native Americans, some are mixed. They can mark 1, 2, or more.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there an evaluation form for this session? Dinah, Pro Literacy is currently revamping all of its webinar policies and standard operating procedures, and there will be evaluations attached to all webinars. Right now, that is not the case. Christina said, I think it might be if someone who is Hispanic and also of African descent or Hispanic and more European descent, that's how they decide. Someone else put a link to a website on here, which i94.cbp.dhs.gov. I don't know what that is. I don't know how we'll keep going here for, until we run out of time. I've got more questions than I can ask. So Lynn, someone said, well, what is a good resource or assessment for students to take before and after the class, the citizenship class, to track their progress? Also, where can I find the book that you're showing us in class?
Okay, so Dan, you are putting the link to the New Readers Press order page, correct?
Yeah, I did that, but I'll post the link again.
Okay.
this particular, I'll go back and I'll just put the link for the whole series of all your books there. The Citizenship Passing the Test link. Oh, I was talking to one particular person and then I posted again, and maybe not everyone saw it. So I just put a link in there again.
Okay. So
Okay.
the first part of that question had something to do with assessment, but I didn't hear
Yeah.
the.
Uh, I'm trying to find it. Oh, I literally don't know how far back to scroll at this point. I'm trying. Um, every time I scroll, it just hops back up. Um, what's a good resource? Okay, here it is. What's a good resource or assessment for students to take before and after the citizenship class to track their progress?
I'll tell you what I do. Um, Usually in an intake, I ask a few of the 100 civics questions, and I give someone a dictation from the official dictation list. And, in a normal intake, I also ask some of the basic personal information questions, and that gives me an idea of where they are at the outset. And then after a citizenship class, I give every student an authentic practice interview, one-to-one, and I make sure that they can perform exactly as they will need to in a real interview. If you want to know more about how to do that, read the teacher's guide.
Someone wants to know if the fee can be paid over a few months.
No, it has to be paid all at once with the application. But you know what? There's something really important you should know, and it's in the Ready for the Interview book. There are there is some help available for people who are low income. If they're on public assistance, they can show evidence that they qualified for that assistance, like food stamps or SSI. And they can get the entire fee waived. There's a particular form that they need to fill out. And again, this information is available on the Jones Library website. It's also available at the USCIS website, just a little harder to find. But they can get everything waived if they're very low income. If they're in the middle ground, if they are below certain poverty guidelines, which you can look up, they can ask for a reduced fee. So they would pay half of the normal fee. And that's something that they can ask for right on the N400 form. It's in there. They document their income using a tax form or something along those lines. And then they can just submit half of the fee. And it's a little bit complicated, but you can read all about it in the instructions for the N400, and you can read about it at the Jones Library's website for the citizenship section.
This next question, I'm not sure anyone can answer it. It's asking you to speculate. Do you anticipate any major changes in testing or N400 applications with the new administration?
So I don't think that the N400 is going to be revised anytime soon. I think there's a chance that the new administration will want to toy around with the citizenship test. And I will let people know as soon as I hear anything about that. You can go to my author's website. It's just called citizenshipnews.us. And citizenship news is all one word. And on that website, you can read the latest news that I've sent out, but you can also subscribe so that it'll be sent to your email. If I hear anything about a new test being developed, I'm going to share that information with all the readers of Citizenship News.
Here's a question. Says, I have a question about eligibility on the new N400. Previously, we were asked, or they were asked, how are you eligible to become a citizen? Do you know if they now use any reference in the interview to general provision, or
Yeah.
or will the old wording still work? I know the answer has not changed.
So is this question is about whether they're going to ask at the interview or just on the form,
Uh,
or is that not clear?
on the new N400, that's all it says.
Okay,
Uh,
well, I'll answer both. How's that?
okay, okay.
So on the new N400, they ask in part one, information about your eligibility. And almost everybody is going to check the first box, and that box says general provisions. And I don't know why they decided to word it that way, because who knows what general provision means? You have to read the instructions to figure out that what that means is that you've been a permanent resident for the last 5 years, and that's your eligibility for citizenship. So if this participant is asking, are they going to ask this at the interview? It's a really good question,
Well,
actually.
I unmuted Roberta. It's her question.
Okay,
She can
go ahead.
clarify.
Yeah, I'm wondering, will they actually make reference to that at the interview? Because I've had some of my students now who have completed the application start answering when I say, how are you eligible to become a citizen? They give the response general provision. And I'm sure that's not what they're looking for. I know it's still, 5 years. Most people are applying under the general provision, but
Yeah.
and I just wonder, have you gotten any feedback about that since the new form went out?
No, I haven't heard of anybody being asked, what is your eligibility for citizenship? I assume that they're asked, how long have you been a permanent resident?
Right.
But that officers have free reign to ask almost anything they want. So it's quite possible that an examiner might ask, what is
Are
your,
you applying under the general
they
provision, for
might,
instance? Yeah.
it's possible, or they might just say, what is your eligibility for citizenship? It would be awful if they did, and I would like to give them the benefit of the doubt that they would just ask, how long have you been a permanent resident? But yeah, you can practice it both ways just in case.
Okay. I have a follow-up question. Could you talk about the new question about Social Security and notifying the Social Security Administration?
Sure, I actually had somebody come in very confused about that last month. So there's a new section on page 2 of the N400. It says, do you want the Social Security Administration to issue you an original or replacement Social Security card and update your status if and when you become naturalized? And this is actually a really good thing that they figured out a way for the two parts of the government to talk to each other, so that if somebody becomes a citizen, automatically they'll be issued a new Social Security card, and they don't have to go through the process of applying for an updated card. So this is a good thing, but my student was confused about it, and he wanted to say no because he thought that that would create more paperwork, or it would be I don't know, sharing information he didn't want to share, or I'm not sure what his reluctance was, but I convinced him to check yes, because this saves the students an awful lot of time. They're going to have to get their Social Security updated so that it's clear that they're eligible for certain things that non-citizens are not eligible for. So this just saves them a step, and it's offering to let the one government department talk to the other government department and make it all easier for our students. So it's something I think you should encourage them to just check yes and allow the government to do its job.
That is very helpful. Thank you, because I've noticed students are reluctant. Yep. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
All right. The next question, if you know, does the travel history government page work for U.S. citizens too?
Huh?
Yeah, somebody put a link to a travel history government page in the chat. So I guess that's a question for
Oh,
somebody.
I think I understand. So
Oh,
if you're, I think they're asking, even if you're not applying for citizenship, can you look up your own history that way? And the answer is yes.
okay. Do they find out right away if they passed?
Yes, they do.
Okay, let's see. How do you? Okay, I'm
Oh,
gonna.
can I just interrupt?
Yeah.
They find out right away that they passed, and they're given this checklist that says which parts of the test they passed. So whether they pass or fail, they can show you that certificate or that checklist so you can see. Because sometimes the students don't really understand what happened at the interview, but the checklist will tell you whether they passed or what parts of the test they passed.
Okay. Next question. How do you walk the line so that you don't provide advice that would be considered legal? For example, telling a student how to fill out the waiver form.
The waiver.
Okay, that is, let me see.
I'm not sure
Tamara,
if we're talking about a fee
Tamara,
waiver or a
I-
test waiver.
I'll unmute that person and see if any clarification can be added. Meanwhile, I'll go to the next question,
Fee
which
waiver.
is, oh, there's Tamara. Okay, go ahead.
It's the fee waiver. Things that are financial sometimes concern me in giving students information. I don't help students also to fill out their tax forms. We refer them to VITA people who will help with that. And I'm wondering if other citizenship instructors help people to fill out the fee waiver. How do you do it without looking like you're giving legal advice?
I'm not sure if teachers ought to fill out fee waivers. I don't. But what you can do is what I do. I'm holding up. It's a table that's put out by immigration that shows whether or not you can qualify for the full waiver or for the reduced fee. And what students could do is look up their own income on the chart based on the number of family members they have and decide whether or not they would qualify. And then I do sometimes print out the fee waiver, the full fee waiver form, and talk to students about what they need to do in the various parts of the form, but I don't fill it out for them. And then if somebody qualifies for the reduced fee, it's right there in the application, and you can print out the instructions for the application as well. And the information's there. They'll figure it out, or they'll find somebody to help them.
And is it also true that if a person does the online form, they can't submit a fee waiver form at the same time, that they have to do it via paper?
Yeah, how about that? It's unfortunate. They haven't figured out a way to do the reduced fee online, so you have to submit a paper form.
Thank you.
Lynn, I want to thank you very much. I think we've made it through all of the questions. And there was a reminder that you had promised to send me, the links so that they can learn how to get and subscribe to Citizenship News. And I assured them you would share that with me. And I subscribe to Citizenship News, so I must have figured it out at one point. But I'll let you send me the link nonetheless. I'm about to sign off here, but I do see one more question just popped up. And it is, are there any community groups, social service providers, or USCIS funded programs that you're aware of that might have trainers who can help students walk through the N400 form and get ready for the test?
To walk people through the form. So I think what you want to point students to is organizations that have accreditation to fill out the forms for students for a nominal fee. There is a way to look that up. You know what? I will send you a link, Dan.
Okay, very good. Well, uh, we're about out of time, and you certainly filled the time with answers to lots of questions. So I hope people got some of the help they needed. and watch for more information in the follow-up email. And as always, Lynne, it's a pleasure. Thank you for sharing the knowledge that you have with the group today, and for authoring these books that are available through New Readers Press.
Thank you.